Welcome to the Naturalist Training, iNaturalist projects and Serpentine Grasslands. This is our 5th online training event. You can find past recordings on our YouTube channel. In this presentation, we will hear from Merav Vonshak about iNaturalist projects and what makes them fun and interesting, and from Paul Heiple about our special serpentine soil and their unique life forms. Hi, my name is Deb Kramer. I'm the founder and executive director of Keep Coyote Creek Beautiful, and I'll be your moderator today. I've been fortunate to be bit by the nature bug when I was young and have been hiking and backpacking and gardening ever since. And over the past 9 years, I've had the great fortune to build a community around Coyote Creek through Keep Coyote Creek Beautiful's events. And one of my favorite activities is our BioBlitz events, where we explore a locale for a couple of hours and learn from naturalists about what we find. Today's training will be really special in that we're fortunate to have both Merav Vonshak and Paul Heiple to share their experiences and knowledge with us. Merav's talk will focus on formal projects within iNaturalist. And one of my favorite projects is the Scatology project that helps, where people will help to identify wildlife poop. Paul will share his passion for the serpentine landscape, what lives there and where you can find them locally. So Keep Coyote Creek Beautiful is a community-based organization that sees Coyote Creek as a resilient ecosystem for all living things to enjoy. We engage, educate, and encourage people by bringing communities together to take action for, learn about, and play along a healthy Coyote Creek. We host creek cleanup events, BioBlitz events, backpacking, nature walks, lots of other things, including classroom education, and college projects. So I'd love to have you have your best Zoom experience. So mute your audio, turn off your video, set the video layout to speaker mode and full screen. And you can put your questions in chat and I'll be moderating it as we go through. Let me introduce our first speaker. Paul Heiple is a naturalist interested in all aspects of science in the natural world. He serves in a variety of capacities with many groups. He's involved with the California Native Plant Society's Santa Clara Valley, San Mateo County Invasive Plant Chair. He's also the chapter representative at San Mateo County's Weed Management Area. He's a past member of the Portola Valley Conservation Committee, and he leads the Friday Weeders at Edgewood County Park. He's also an associate at Jasper Ridge working in the herbarium. Outside the world of plants, Paul is a geologist by training, where he worked for Getty Oil Company, exploring for oil in the Williston Basin of North Dakota. He made an early connection between the locations plants grow and the rocks underneath when mapping areas with rocks covered by soil. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Paul now. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
All right, well, I'm going to share my screen and set it up here. Okay, ready to start. This is an outcrop of serpentinite at Edgewood, and it's my hoary here is about 7 inches long. This is a typical outcrop of serpentine in our area. They vary quite a bit, but I want to go into what serpentinite or serpentine is. So are you a geologist or a botanist is the question. If you're a geologist, you call it serpentinite. And if you're a botanist, you call it serpentine. Geologists use serpentine to describe the minerals that make up serpentinite. And botanists differ between do not differentiate between rocks and minerals. So it's actually serpentine soils are important. So there are 2 kinds of crusts on the earth. There's oceanic crust, mostly basalt, thin sediments, and they're young and thin, and continental crust, mostly granitic composition, thick sediments in places, and typically older with younger crust at the edges of the continents, and they're often more than twice as thick as the oceanic crust. And plants evolved on continental crust. So when you start looking at serpentinite, you're talking about something that is not what plants evolved with. Here's the Earth showing the earthquakes that occur on the Earth. And these earthquakes show the edges of the plates. This is plate tectonics. So what happens is the oceanic crust makes up most of the Earth. 70%, only 30% is continental. But that moves around and it brings material up against a continent and builds the continents over time through processes of weathering and melting of the rocks. Here's a simplification of what you just saw. Here's what plate tectonics does. You have a mid-ocean ridge where the plates pull apart. The material that comes up out of those pulled up areas is basalt, and those then move towards the continents where they are pushed back down into the mantle of the Earth. And that is how you build continents. You just keep doing this over time. Any piece of a continent that ends up out in the ocean, like the Philippines, eventually will hit a continent and be cemented to that continent. One of the things that's interesting about how they discovered this, by the way, the geologists didn't know anything about the ocean floor until the 1940s and 50s when they started to study it. And one of the things they found out was that the ocean floor has stripes of magnetic anomalies. The Earth's pole switches back and forth between north being the North Pole and South Pole, and then they switch the magnetic field. And so you end up on the ocean floor with these stripes. Well, that's where they found out that this is pulling apart. And as the lavas come out, they set their magnets to the pole at the time they cooled. And here's what it looks like off the coast of Oregon. You can see those stripes. It's a little bit more confusing here because this is being scrunched over time. So I'm going to run a little, I hope I can run this. Yeah, this is what happened to California in the last 40 million years. So what you saw there was that the ocean floor was spreading. Go back to that one. The ocean floor was spreading, and the oceanic crust was being thrust under California and the North American continent. But as the North American continent moved west, it overran that spreading center right in this area. And as it did that, it began to tear this apart and break a piece of the continent off. You can see Baja California pulling off here, all of this material moving up. Now, why is that important? Because when you do that sort of thing, when you collide the continents and you pull it apart, you bring oceanic crust to the continent and you bring up this lower mantle. This lower mantle part below the basaltic crust of the ocean. This is a section through the ocean floor or ocean crust. So here's the material down here that would be turned into serpentinite. These turn into greenstones, and then these are greywackies and other parts of the Franciscan. So to make serpentinite, you just add water to ultramafic rocks, and the reaction takes place over a wide range of temperatures and pressures, and it increases the amount of magnesium, decreases the amount of iron, and serpentinite, believe it or not, has 19% by weight of water. Okay, serpentine is a challenge for plants to grow on because it doesn't resemble the continent at all. It's very high in magnesium. The calcium-magnesium ratio is so bad that it's toxic to most plants. It's low in phosphorus and potassium, which are the two major things that plants need for fertilizer. It's also a poor soil former, tends to make thin soils and heavy clays, and for the most part, the soils are just rocky material. And all of these make it very hard for a plant to thrive on serpentinites. So serpentine tolerant plants, they have evolved to take this niche, the thin soils and clays. They are able to handle the magnesium to calcium ratio, as well as other factors. Why do they do this? Well, one thing that they have that you don't get on normal soils is you get all the light you want. Plenty of light out there. And there's not very many other plants taking up your water, although the water doesn't hold very well in some of these soils. And most plants grow on serpentinite are small, and in other habitats would be shaded out. And serpentine is highly variable and mixes with other rock types. So here's the composition of serpentinite. It's low in silica, which if you think of that, that's sand, and low in many things that plants need. Plants need calcium. They don't need 38% magnesium. It's low in sodium, low in potassium, phosphorus. All of these are all hardly detectable in serpentinites. And the big three that plants need, this is on every fertilizer bag, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So the big three, it doesn't have two of them. And if you don't have those, you don't have much life. So nitrogen is also depleted in serpentinite soils. Okay, but serpentine supports all types of vegetation. You can get forests, chaparrals, scrub, grasslands, and forblands. And in fact, most of what you're calling a grassland is actually a forbland. If you go out, there are fewer grasses. In fact, actually a lot fewer grasses if you go to places that haven't been fertilized by the car emissions. They're all forbs. So this is the kind of serpentinite right here that is really toxic to plants. It looks like this. And you'll notice the little dot right here, that's a magnet. The rocks that these were derived from had a lot of iron in it, but they end up having almost no iron because it's driven out of the minerals, but it ends up being in the serpentinite as magnetite. And so almost all serpentinite, you put a magnet on it, it'll stick. So that's a good indicator of most serpentinites. These are a little bit more degraded serpentinites. They have little less water, more silica. This is what happens when they react with water in the continental areas. So these are going to support more plants. And then you get this kind of serpentinite, which is highly graded. It does still have some of the old crystals that were in the original igneous rock. They remain as ghosts. And here's the most degraded. This is actually opal that's derived from serpentinite. And you'll find areas that have this, and a lot more plants will grow in these areas than will grow in the other serpentinites. So here is the original rock. This is the Cedars up in Mendocino County. And this is actually the peridotite, the stuff that the serpentine is derived from. You'll notice the trees growing on it. They're all cedars. So it still is considered a serpentinite. It's actually, serpentinites are these ultramafic rocks. And this one is turning into serpentinite at the surface temperatures. This is a spring where the material that comes out is deleting the calcium. The water in this it has a pH of 11. It feels like soap. Now I'm going to talk about local serpentinites. This is a map of Edgewood County Park, where I do most of the work, and have very familiar with the serpentinites there. And we have all of this area in here and in here. This is also mapped as serpentinite, but when you look at it in the field, you realize that it is actually full of metamorphic rocks, and therefore has some of the minerals that plants need that serpentinite doesn't have. And these grow very interesting, very species rich chaparrals and little forests of leather oaks. And here's a USGS map showing it. They did not map the serpentinites here that have the metamorphic rocks, but you can see the vegetation right there that's growing in them. And you notice that there's this central ridge of greenstone. Now that's interesting because that is something that I have realized goes on in Edgewood. It's a big area of forested area on the north side and chaparral on the south side. And then you see these little areas all over that also have these trees. And what I determined was going on was that serpentinite actually is kind of like a pudding with chunks of stuff in it. And these chunks, this is showing you the contacts. Here's the big chunk up here and the serpentine soils down here, but they're mixing with the greenstone soils, making these strips of places where other plants can grow. This is mostly California sagebrush. And this is a landslide coming down here, and you get trees down on the serpentinite because the landslide left a toe right there of greenstone. Here's the contact with the serpentine here, and you see the change right here. You get yerba santa. This is the metamorphic block, and it goes then into even a thicker growth over here with all the chaparral. And then you get these. These I call rock islands because here's a coast live oak surrounded by coffee berries, surrounded by leather oaks. So that's serpentinite here, something else in here, and it has enough of the nutrients that are needed for a live oak to grow. And as you go into the serpentinite, you get this ring effect. Okay, we're going to be going down to this serpentinite, which is Coyote Ridge. You can see all of this blue. This is Communications Hill. I think this is Tulare Hill. It looks like California has a lot of serpentinite when you look at this area, but this is special. Actually, in California, there's about 1% of the outcrop of rocks is serpentinite, which is high. I mean, California is not a place where serpentinite is rare. In fact, it is the state rock. And it's the state rock because many minerals are associated with it. So here's a picture or just the aerial photo, and you can see the contact is really strong. It just stands right out. That color of the grassland just is obvious, even from space. Now I'm going to talk about some of the plants that grow in there. This is a plant that is endemic, does not grow anywhere else but serpentinites, and it only grows in Edgewood. This is the San Mateo's thorn mint. And this is another rare endemic here in the Bay Area. This is used to be called the Hillsborough Fritillaria. And they thought it was a bicolor, or no, biflora, but somebody went out and actually took a study on this. I got these pictures when he was out looking at it and determined that these are actually related to a cluster of serpentine loving fritillarias. There's this one, there's agrostis, the stink one, and oops, this one, the Frillaria liliaceae. So this is the fragrant frillary. It grows at Edgewood in a number of spots. I've seen it at Coyote Ridge. It's a rare plant, but it only will grow in the heavy clays of serpentinite. So this is, Cirsium fontanelli, the fountain thistles. There are 3 varieties of this thistle, and they all grow in serpentine seeps. So if you take the area that has serpentinite, which is 1%, and you take only the areas where it's seeping, not springing, it's just seeps, this is a very rare occurrence. However, at Coyote Ridge, down near the base, there's a huge stand of the Mount Hamilton fountain thistle. And here's a picture of it in flower. The clay-loving Mariposa lily is a serpentine endemic as well. It turns out they used to call this a venustus, but they went and found or noticed that there were differences in the way the nectaries and the dots were on it, and that they could distinguish it. And when we went out to look for it, we found out that this one always was growing on serpentinite, and the venustus was growing always on something else. So, by the way, little excitement here. You got a spider eating a fly that was coming to pollinate it. And we also see the Dudleya. This is the San Mateo, oh, not San Mateo, Santa Clara Valley Dudleya. It's Dudleya Bramsii variety Seychellii, and subspecies actually Seychellii. All of Bramsii except for one grow on serpentinites. And the one that doesn't grow on serpentinite grows on another rare rock type, which is a carbonate in the southern Sierras. And here's what it looks like on its substrate. Blends right in. It's really hard to see. There's another plant back over in here. Just grows in really hard conditions. Now this is a Lysingea. This is his Lysingea hololeuca, and this one grows in Edgewood on that serpentinite metamorphic belt. This one will grow off of serpentinites, but there are a lot. I don't have a picture of any of the other Lysingeas that do only grow on serpentinite, and Coyote Ridge is absolutely covered with Lysingea hololeuca, or not hololeuca, I'm sorry, glabra. So we won't see it in flower because it flowers in August, which is something to imagine. You're down there in the Coyote Valley and the temperature is probably 100 degrees in the shade, and it's growing in the sun, and it has stems that are about as thick as a thread, and it's blooming. How it does it, I don't know. This is Aquilegia eximia, which is a serpentine endemic too in the area. Grows along streams and seeps where the substrate is serpentinite. It's different from Formosa by being a flatter and longer stamens. Top here is more, and it's a larger flower. So it's definitely another serpentine endemic that you only will find on serpentinite. I've seen a lot of this on a serpentinite Styles Ranch, and I haven't seen it at Coyote Ridge, but it is possible. Now, going up around the state, this is another serpentine endemic. It's the California lady slipper orchid. And the only place you'll find this is where water is running close to serpentinite or on serpentinite. And one time I found this, I could hear the water running and I knew I was in serpentinite. I said, I'm going to find the orchid, and I did. It's real easy. There are also milkweeds that grow on serpentinite. And this milkweed grows up I took this picture up on Snow Mountain. And this was growing on the bare patches of serpentinite. There was nothing else there. And you would walk away from it, and these leaves would just disappear. The whole plant would disappear. The only thing that you'd really stand out were the flowers. So there is an milkweed that grows on serpentinite. These grow off of serpentinite, but they're most commonly found on serpentinites. This is the purple mouse ears, Erythranthe douglasii, and they are just gorgeous, and they are flowering now. And I have seen these growing on Coyote Ridge. This is a little cluster, and you can see the serpentinite all around it. And then there's, let's see, Pacaria Rhenii. This is a Senecio, or what used to be considered a Senecio, with this bizarre color. And this grows on Walker Ridge on the serpentinites. And you can see the serpentinites sitting right next to it. And here's another fritillary that grows up on serpentinites in the rockiest areas. This is a Fritillaria purdii, Walker Ridge. And that's what I have for you. Are there any questions or comments?
Yes, Paul, we actually have a question that came in from Robert. He says, is asbestos in serpentine? And if so, was the asbestos industry big in California?
No, but serpentinite does have, actually the way it works is that there are two major minerals in serpentinites. There's antigerite and chrysotile. Chrysotile is the asbestos. Now, there are also other things that are used as asbestos, and they are actually worse than the serpentine asbestos. The only thing that they have found that you get from serpentine asbestos is asbestosis if you are mining it or if you're, breathing it a lot. The mesothelioma is related to a different mineral that also produces these fibers, comes from South Africa, and that's the one that has caused all the problems. You never heard of the asbestos having a problem till about World War II, when they started importing all this stuff from South Africa. So yeah, it's there, but it's not as deadly as the other stuff.
Do we have any other questions for Paul? It's quite fascinating hearing about the specialized plants that are there.
And there are many, many others.
Can you tell us, Paul, a little bit about any of the other wildlife that might specialize based on either the plants or the overall environment?
Well, we do have a endemic serpentine species up at Edgewood. I've never seen it. It's a small harvestman called the serpentine harvestman, and it apparently lives under rocks, and I've never turned over rocks and found one yet. It's really small, though. As far as I know, all the rest of the species, I mean, obviously there's going to be things that eat the serpentine endemics, and they must be, what do you call it, rare too?
All right. Well,
In fact,
thank you so much.
Yeah, that's probably a place to start studying, is go and look at the insects that live out there.
Well, thanks so much for sharing all of that wonderful information about our specialized environment. So I'm going to turn it over to Merav momentarily. But first, let me introduce her. So Merav will talk a bit about BioBlitz events, how and when to use iNaturalist projects. And if you aren't already using iNaturalist, I highly recommend getting involved with this tool. It is so much fun and a great way to learn about nature. Merav Vonshak founded BioBlitz Club, a community science organization to encourage people to get outside and learn about nature. Through this group's actions over the nearly past 8 years, hosted 100 events and well over 2,000 people have participated. And KCCB has been intimately involved in that. And we've contributed to the growing body of knowledge about nature through iNaturalist. All right, Merav, you're up.
Thanks, Deb. Okay, let me share my screen. I want to talk a little bit about iNaturalist projects. We thought this would be part of a previous presentation, but then I realized there's just so many cool projects that I wanted to share that they should get a little bit more space some other time. So this is today. iNaturalist projects are just another way for us to categorize observations. When you document something that you find interesting, when you go out on a BioBlitz or just on your own, you share it with this huge community of so many people worldwide with millions of observations. But observations can get lost. And one way to find them is to categorize them using projects. So you could add your observations into projects manually, depending on the project. Some of them would just get sucked in automatically. And I'd like to show you some examples and try and explain the differences. So when you log into iNaturalist, so again, it's a smartphone app, but it's also a website. The website has far more options than the app. And you use the same username and password that you created for your app on your desktop computer, and then you can see all your observation, but you could also see everybody else's observations. So once you go into this section, into the community, you could click on projects, which would take you to this page that shows you all the different projects. But basically, it lets you search for a project. And by the way, all the projects that I will show today, the name is right on the slide. So if you're interested in looking at any of these projects or joining them, you simply go to this screen, to the project screen, and then you search for them. You type in the name right here, and it will take you to that project. And this is where you also start a project. So once you click on Start a Project, it will give you two different options. One is a collection project, and the other is umbrella project. So basically, a collection project is what we'll create for a BioBlitz event when we all go out during an event for a few hours or a whole day, and we document everything we see within a specific area and a specific time frame. The collection project could also be a few other options that I'll specify later, and I'll explain these differences. But this is what the project page would look like. Okay, when you create a collection project, it will ask you for a name, description, logos, all sorts of stuff like that. And then you can add a place. So a place is something that is usually already created. Let's say I want to create a BioBlitz project for Almaden Quicksilver Park in San Jose, where we live. So I could just type in Almaden Quicksilver, and the project already exists, the place already exists. It's basically a polygon with the boundaries of that area. I can create a project for my city, San Jose, or for California. So all these different polygons are already in the system. You could also create your own polygon using GIS software like Google Earth, and then use that. But it's better to use existing polygons as much as possible. The rest of the project page would look like this. It would ask you if you want to maybe only include sound observations or only photos or different parameters. You could have a specific date for a BioBlitz, for example, or a range of dates or month. So basically what we do when we organize a BioBlitz, we'll create a project that has a specific date and a specific polygon. So then all observations created during that day in that specific park will be automatically included in the project. So you don't need to do anything other than take some observations to have your observations added to that project. Other projects, you might need to add your observations manually or even join the project for that. And then this is just the end of that page. Once you're done with all the different fields, you click done and it will create your project. So what are the different kinds of projects? So the first one I'd like to introduce is a BioBlitz project. So again, a BioBlitz is when we go to a park and document everything we can find within a specific time frame. And the project at the end of the event would look like this. Okay, it's pretty cool. During the event, if people are logging observations as you go, you could see them, you know, getting in there, which is pretty fun. Some kids like to compete, but whatever. Anyway, this is what it would look like. You'll have your little photo, you have your little logo. You could add logos of the different organizations that organize the event. And then you could look at the different observations, species, identifiers, and observers. You could see who made the most and what are the different specifications for that project. This is my location, for example, my place, that polygon. And this is what it would look like on a map. My favorite part, looking at all these different observations and see how much we covered. This is just a BioBlitz we did recently. And then you could view it in different ways. You could look at the different observations. If you go on the grid view, then you could look at the different observations one by one. You could look at all the different species so that it would show you the one that was logged the most. And if you scroll down, you'll see the rest of them. People who help you identify the observations, those are really crucial for any project. And sometimes you can reach out to people to help you identify things that you can't identify yourself, or things that you think are interesting. Maybe you can find a local or non-local expert to help you identify something interesting. And then you can look at who made all these observations, different pages here in the same project. Another kind of project is an umbrella project. So from the same page that I showed you, you can create a BioBlitz or you can create an umbrella project. Umbrella project is a project that puts together many different project pages. Okay, so for example, for our newt study, we have a project for every season that we did our study, and then we have many other projects for different studies for other, it's a roadkill study, so for other species of roadkill that are not newts, for live things, lower numbers, unfortunately, not in this picture, and many other things, but they are all included in this one umbrella project. So if someone is interested in sharing a link to all our database, as I often do, I can just share one link with people because everything is right here. Okay, if I click on one of those projects in the previous slide, I will get something like this. So I'll get that project that has the name of the observers, it has all the observations, and it also has a journal post, which is a really useful tool for us to communicate with everyone who is into this study. And I'll get back to that at the end. Okay, there are other kind of projects. So you can create a project for a group of organisms, taxa, like lichens, for example. And that could be your way to communicate with your community, which would be people interested in lichens in a specific area or everywhere. It could also be, another example for a project about a specific group is this Flies of the US and Canada, which is an amazing project because it's not only including all the flies of this area, but it's also a way for people to create an amazing community. So the guys that created the project are teaching people how to identify flies, and they have, I think it's like a weekly session where on Zoom where people can learn how to identify flies. And it's amazing how much you could learn just by joining something like that. You could also create similar projects by location. So this is an example for a project I created that actually includes the place that Paul mentioned, Coyote Ridge. So these are all the open spaces managed by Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. So I created this project for a presentation I did a few years ago. And it's all these different polygons are those sites that they manage. And it automatically includes all observations made within these parks. These two kind of projects with organisms or location, you could basically generate those by using filters on iNaturalist. But sometimes it's really useful to have a specific project for that, because then it's easier for you to communicate with your community and also share it with other people. But there are other kind of projects. So remember this screen with collection projects and umbrella projects. These are not the only projects you can create. There's the traditional project, which is the way it used to be done before these were created. So if you scroll down, you could use this link to create a traditional project, which will give you a slightly different screen. And yeah, you could see here different parameters. This is just the way it used to be, but the important differences here. So traditional projects are not useful for BioBlitz and usually not for a specific place or taxon, because you could do that with the newer projects, the collection project. But this is really useful when you want to be able to control what's getting into your project in a way, I guess. You need to add observations manually to the project. And from this, you can create any kind of project that you're interested in. And I'll give you some examples, even though they're kind of mixed with collection projects and traditional projects. So maybe a better way to explain that is that it doesn't need to be categorized by a specific location or organism. Okay, so I can choose to look at all the organisms that share a specific behavior or a specific habitat, and I'll give you some examples. So for example, when we look at behavioral traits, we could create a project for a specific feeding behavior, okay? Things we find on cow patties, which I think is pretty awesome. Predators, so pictures of animals eating other animals. Mystery oak leaf skeletonizer. I had to include that one. And then interactions with other organisms, such as gall projects, which I created quite a few, but not this one. Pollinators, and many other interactions between different species. So again, this is not a specific species. If I'd create a collection project for all the bees, I might not get what I wanted, because here in this project, the backyard pollinators, they are interested in interactions between pollinators and their flowers, okay? So if I'll have all the bees included, they might not be a specific bee on a flower. It could be a flying bee or landing on something else, or a dead bee or whatever. And it could be a butterfly, it could be a fly. So they're different organisms. So sometimes you can't use the collection project. Okay. Another option is to look at a specific expertise. So in this case, this project would help people who are interested or experts in identifying feathers or scat or animal tracks or bones. It will be really helpful for them to find all those observations easily and help people identify what they found. So these are really useful. And this is a good way for you to upgrade your observation. So let's say I take lots of photos of scat or animal tracks or feathers and all these things. I can add my observations manually to each of these projects so that the relevant experts could find them more easily. Okay. In order to do that, all I need to do is join that project, and then I'll be able to add my observations into that project. Okay. And we'll share a list of all these projects at the end. So if you're interested, if there's some projects that are new to you and you'd like to join them, we'll share a list of all the projects at the end. Okay. Another type of projects, not really a type, but another kind of project is projects that are used for research or advocacy, such as different roadkill projects. There are plenty of them on iNaturalist. They might be a bit gross, but they're actually really important. And you can use those for advocacy, for research, for many different things. There are different projects that are looking at different aspects in conservation, such as algae bloom, global change, many different things. You can categorize observations by habitat. So this is a really cool project, arthropods on snow. Did you know that there are arthropods found in snow? There are actually plenty of them, but it would be very difficult to search specifically for arthropods on snow unless they'll all be added by people into a specific project. So this is a really good way to look at this interesting habitat that I think was not very well known before this project was created. Another cool thing is, what can you find on your compost pile at home? Or what lives at your home? Never Home Alone. It's a wonderful name. So things you could find in your own home, on someone else's home. And this is a really cool project done by a lab in the East Coast in the US, and they just released this interesting analysis of their project recently. We can share the link for that as well. Another cool thing is creating a community around these projects. So a project, as I mentioned, allows us to interact with the community of the people using the project by creating journal posts, by adding specific people. You could find people using your project and you could address them specifically. So the dog fouling project, for example, is a really interesting project looking at creatures found in docks in the marina, for example. These are different creatures that you would usually need to go diving in order to see, but this amazing community of people goes into marinas and look under docks and document all that stuff and find really interesting things. The other project here is the pot fouling project that has some overlap in the community. And that one's really interesting as well, because these people look at things you can find under pots in your backyard, in someone else's backyard, and in plant nurseries. And I was amazed at what they were able to find and how many invasive species. Some of them haven't been known to the state of California, for example, before the project has begun, just by looking at plant nurseries and the stuff they introduce. So really interesting. I highly recommend joining these communities. And then you could also create a project for something that you find, really exciting and weird or interesting, or, all these weird phenomena that we might notice as we go out and document different things. And these are really fun to just kind of, look around, look for interesting observations. And hopefully you have other projects that that you follow, and maybe you could share those with us, because I'd love to learn about more projects. I think one of the problems with projects, at least as far as I know, is that it's difficult to find new projects. The way I find them is when I look at other people's observations, and then if it's on my desktop computer, I could see all the different projects that those observations have been added to. And that's how I learn about new projects. And I'll often join those projects and add my own observations or other people's observations to them. And then sometimes people would add my observations into new projects that I wasn't aware of, and I like that as well. Okay, now what? So let's say you created a project or you find a project that you like. What could you do now? So you could help identify observations, and I'll just very briefly show you how that's done. So let's say I go into this project. I can click on this little arrow here, which will open this window, and then I can click on identify, okay? Which will open this window where I could simply go over all the observations, or I could narrow them down into maybe just plants or just insects or ants or a specific county or city or something I feel comfortable with, because we don't really want people to identify everything unless they actually feel like they know what they're doing, because this is not helpful. But you could always identify things, even just say, oh, it's an animal or it's an insect. I mean, I don't know mushrooms, but I could at least say it's a mushroom. And that's actually helpful too, because sometimes it would just stay as unknown and then nobody would see. Okay, if you click on one of these observations, it will open a window. The computer vision will actually help you identify it. But again, don't just choose something unless you know that that is actually correct. Okay, what else could you do? So you could also download the data if you want to play with it, if you want to do some study, if you want to analyze it, if you want to share it with other people. So the data on iNaturalist is open to everyone. You could go to filters right here, and then go to download. You could narrow it down first because you don't want to download everything on iNaturalist. You probably want to download something specific, so you could get all the parameters you need and then download that, and then you can play with the data. Okay, what else could you do? So you could use journal posts to communicate with people on your project. You could create different visualization. You could share the data that you collected. You could do lots of different things. Again, you could reach out to people. You can create events and create a community. And I think projects are just a really good way to do it. And just to go back to Paul's presentation, I searched for different serpentine plant projects on iNaturalist and found quite a few. I think this was probably the biggest. So if you want to join one and add your observations, you could join this one if you'd like, and we'll share the link at the end.
I noticed that there were a few questions that we had, and I wanted to bring Paul back in as well. So I saw that Robert had a question, Paul, about threats to serpentine. Are there any threats to serpentine?
Yes, there are. People build all over it. And that serpentine block that Edgewood is a part of, they put in emerald hills, and there were rare plants all over that thing. And in some cases, they left the lot alone. They didn't just build on it, but they didn't tell anybody what was there. And when people have houses around and they have their dogs and there's an open place, they go and take their dogs and they poop in there and they pee in there. And guess what that does? A big area of Fritillaria liliaceae was destroyed in that way. I went and found the lot had been preserved, but all it was rank weeds.
Wow. So
Yeah, big
Merav,
problem is fertilization of serpentinite. You know, there's the rare butterfly, of course, that now it probably wasn't, and it's a serpentine endemic. This is the base checker spot butterfly. The plant that it uses for larval food probably grew everywhere, but as we fertilized the soil and all the weeds came in, that plant disappeared, except on serpentines where it doesn't have any competition, and that's where those butterflies have gone.
thanks for sharing that, Paul. Merav, Sharman has a question. The state is considering opening Henry Cove to off-road vehicles. Could a project be a way to oppose such action? such as identifying creatures with plants that would be adversely affected?
What a good question. And yes, I would totally do that. I think this is a really good way to get together all these different observations. So if you start a project like that, and I actually suggested people in Henrico to create a project for the dead newts we saw there on the road a couple of years ago. So yeah, I would create a project, and then the problem is to get people to notice it, right? So one thing you could do is, add all your observations into the project, but then also search for other people's observations that seems relevant, and you can add them yourself into the project. And also, reach out to these people and say, hey, we have a project for that. Could you, document more? You could reach out to people that you see that are very active on iNaturalist in your park or in that area, and ask them to contribute to that project. But I think it's a really good idea, because then you have data and you can't argue with data.
I'd like to make a point about fires. Some of these places haven't burned in a long time, and when they burn, things come up that you never knew were there. And I think people ought to follow up on a fire and go in and document what plants showed up. One of the ones that was really surprising was there's a place out in Pescadero Park called it's this little place where a cedar grows, and that cedar happens to be a rare one, so they protect it. And it burned during the CZU fire, and this plant came up that nobody knew it was there. In fact, it isn't even known in the county of San Mateo, and it came up all over the place. It's just, and it's a big plant, no botanist would have missed it had it been there.
So there was, it's a good point, and there was a project for the CZU fire, actually. I'm looking it up right now.
Did they get the Sedelcia hickmani?
I don't know, but I could post this to our chat if we want.
It was one of there. We went
out.
in and wow, look at all the ceanothus. Look at the flannel bushes come back. What's this?
Thanks for putting that link in the chat about the CZU lightning complex fire perimeter, the name of it.
Yeah, and they actually, so in Henrico, they organized some bioblitzes just for that, but I think in the entire area, they organized a series of bioblitzes after the fire, asking people to document the changes.
Yeah, well, I think after the, what's the telescope up there? The Link telescope on Mount Hamilton?
Yeah, Lick Observatory.
Lick, that's it. The Lick fire, they went in and they found Malacothamnus, and that had never been documented in the park.
If we don't have any questions, I could demonstrate how to create a project, and we can create our own project that hopefully people would contribute to. So how about that?
That would be great. Yeah.
Unless we have some more questions. Okay, so let me share my screen again. Okay, so yeah, this is the CZU fire. So let's say I'm going into iNaturalist. This is my page. And then I can go into community projects. And this is that page I showed you. So here I can share. I can, search for any of those names, like the CZU, whatever. But if I want to start a project, I'll go here. And then this is the collection project, umbrella project, but we want something else. We want to go to the traditional project, okay? The ones that won't get anything automatically, but we'll have to add observations into that manually. So my idea, I don't know if people have a better idea, but my idea for a project for today was to create a project for funny common names. What do you think? Should we do that? Because I had this,
that sounds fun.
This meeting with some people a few weeks ago, and I realized there's so many funny common names that maybe we can categorize them together. So anyway, we can always delete a project afterwards if nobody is interested in it. Okay, so we have project type, it's normal. And then we can add a little icon here. We could, well, let's do that. That would be, whoops, logo. Here's my beautiful logo. And we could add like project cover later with a banner or something like that. So it gives you the exact specifications right here, and it only gets that. You have to be very specific about that. Okay, so here we can write a short description. Please add, whoops. Okay, so this is going to be anywhere, right? So we can ignore this area, which would allow us to add a place or a polygon, okay? So this is anywhere. And then project list, we don't need that. This is actually important, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this little demonstration. It says observation fields. So sometimes you want to add fields that would either be required or suggested. So when someone adds an observation to your project, we'll ask them to fill in the fields. And fields are another way to categorize different things or add information to your observation. So for example, when I document galls, these structures we see on oaks and other plants, I will ask people about the host plant because that's really important, okay? In this case, of course, it's not important. We don't need any specific field here, but this is it. We can create a little project. Okay, so I clicked create. And obviously when you are thinking of creating a new project, think if that's actually a good idea or not, if you need that project, if anyone else would be interested in your project, maybe not. Let's get, whoops, zoom out of the way, and I can send you the link to this project quickly. So if anyone has any funny name in mind, they can add that. So let's say you want to join this project and contribute any observations. You need to get to this page, which you now have the link to, and then it will have a little place here which says join project. Okay, I have added because I just created it, but it will say join. So you click on that, it will ask you some questions, and then you join the project. And once you did, you can go to any of your observations and add them to that project. So for example, well, obviously this one has nothing in it for now, but let's say I want to go to one of my observations and add that to this project. So I just open another window. These are my observations. I don't know which one has a funny name though. Let's say it's the fox squirrel, just to show you how it's done. So I clicked on that observation. And now when I scroll down, I have all sorts of options here. So these are all the projects that this observation is already added to, okay? And yes, dog vomit slime mold. Yes, this is why I actually wanted to create this thing. Thank you, Efren, for saving me. Okay, so this shows me all the projects that I already joined, okay? And I can type one of them and add that. But since Efren just saved me, we are going to look for a dog vomit slime mold because this is definitely the one that needs to be here. So to find one of my observations, I simply go to species. I start typing dog vomit. If you don't know dog vomit slime mold, it's definitely one of the best common names. And one of the reasons I really like slime molds because they have awesome names and because they look like this. I mean, it's so weird. Anyway, let's add that. So I'll go to projects and type in funny common names. Okay. And this is our first observation in that weird project that we created that now has one observation. It's very sad. Oh, thank you, someone who joined. So anyway, that was my very quick demonstration. Anyone has questions about this while I'm still showing my screen?
No, that was
But
really fun. Like thinking about getting creative and yeah, Efren, the dog vomit slime mold. I think the first time I heard that, that was pretty funny.
yes, yes, very good. And I'm sure there's a few other slime molds that would do well in that project. But yeah, feel free to join the project, and when you think of something, you can add your own observations or someone else's observations. I think I did have some weird thing I wanted to add to that.
So actually, Merav, while you're rooting around for that, Rowan, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hi, I was wondering how to get people like interested and involved. Like, how do you like spread the word and get people to like join up and be a part of it?
Well, I think locally, Rowan, is there are existing organizations like the California Native Plant Society or Audubon who host a lot of different kinds of events. And you mentioned that you are in Fresno, and that's a very large regional area, that there probably are groups within that metro area that host bioblitzes. And I would start with those two organizations because they probably do have something like that.
Yeah, so I think it's a good idea to reach out to organizations. And another thing you could do is you could look at the top iNaturalist users in your area and see who they are, and if they're actually local and not just visitor from the Bay Area that's go there looking for stuff, then you could invite them to join you. You can send them direct messages on iNaturalist, or you could tag them on a journal post, either on your own profile, or if you create any project, you could address different people. And that's often a good way to get to know new people and invite people to your events. Okay, so how to upload observations from Merlin? So I know there's a way to do it because Michael told me there is. I'm not sure how to do it. I think you need to download the sound recording file, and then you can upload that to iNaturalist. I think on Android, there's a straightforward way to do it, and unfortunately, I think on my iPhone, there isn't. So I need to download it and then upload it, but I think on Android, there's an easier way to do it.
Great. Sharman asks, how would we contact others to join a project? Kind of tag them in the journal? Is that how you would do it? Or
to join a
them
project?
message?
Yeah, you could definitely tag them. So if, let's say, I found some, I don't know for the funny observation, but let's say I organize gull events, okay? When we all go out and we want to look for gulls in a specific week of the year. So I look for the top gull observers in different areas, and then I'll send them a direct message and say, hey, we have these events that we organize, and you could view our past events here, or I want to organize a new event. Please join us. And maybe you want to organize an event for that week, because people would organize local events. I started organizing a thing called Gull Week a few years ago, and I decided we need to have one. And we organized, I think, 4 so far, with people worldwide joining in. I mean, iNaturalist is an amazing platform for that. Because once you start tagging people, they will find more people, and they will find more and more and more people. If you have an idea that you were able to reach out to the right people, I guess. But sometimes it just requires using the app more, like getting to know people, being part of this community, so that you know the right people who know other people who know more people, and then you can create something. But sometimes you could just start, with whatever you have, and it will grow with time.
I want to get back to what Rowan asked as well. I don't know if you completely answered this, Merav, but when asking about finding other people, is I've also looked at observations within an geographic area that I'm interested in, and maybe a particular plant that I'm interested in, and then see who has observed it. And then I can communicate with them directly through the messaging portal. And then from there, you can also, and I think you mentioned this too, with regards to adding projects, if you put your projects in the in particular projects, so I can then do the reverse, look and see what projects this person's observations are in, and then maybe they're from a BioBlitz, and then I can contact whoever the organizer is for the BioBlitz. So a couple different ways that you can go about finding other people. And Lyndon suggests with regards to building more teams is maybe working with the Sierra Club, local high schools and community college classes, neighborhood associations and church groups. And Helen suggests also teaming up with even science teachers at local high schools. And we have been making efforts to do that as well. And when we host our BioBlitzes, we look at the schools that are nearby and send the administrators or science teachers that we have contact with our information about our BioBlitzes.
Yeah, and it takes time, right? It takes sometimes a long time to work on all these connections and get to know all these people, but I think it's very rewarding, and with time you can reach out to universities and schools and teachers and different communities. For example, one thing that Keep Catholic Creek Beautiful is doing is offering community hours to high school students. And that's been very useful in, getting these people. But then they come to get their hours, but then they like it. So they come back and they bring their families and they bring their siblings, and it becomes like a family event. And we get many families that keep coming back because it's like their family outing for the weekend. It's wonderful.
Does anybody have, for example, some projects that they've joined that might be interesting to share with other people? I have one called Found Feathers that I send some of my feathers that I have no idea where they came from, and I add them to the project. And oftentimes I'll get somebody who says, "Oh, this is from a American crow on the right rear tail feather." Kind of feel like that person must do taxidermy to get that. Chris has a question. Maybe we could start by combining both of tonight's fantastic presentations and create a project for observations in serpentine soils.
So I was thinking about that, and that's why I decided to first search and make sure that it doesn't already exist, and it does. There are quite a few different serpentine soil projects, and the one I shared with you that we'll share later, the link again with the presentation notes, seems like a good one to join, so that if you're going out this, spring to look for different flowers, you could add your observations to that. And I think they'll actually be added automatically. That's why it's a very big project. So what they did there, it's a collection project. So it's an automatically working project where they added a very long list of all these plants that they were interested in. So any of these plants that is documented anywhere within their polygon, which is probably California, I don't remember, will be added automatically. And if you join the project, it's just easier for you to view it, but your observation will be there anyway if you document any of those plants.
And I have something to add. I had an interesting where I posted a species that was endangered, and then someone from California Fish and Game contacted me and said if I would add it to the California Natural Diversity Database, where you can obscure, and you should obscure the location for any endangered species that you find, so that nobody else gets a bad idea from the general public. But then she said there's a way of making that then visible to the curator of the project, which in this case is a scientist from Fish and Game. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so thanks, Annette. And usually any observation of an endangered species should be obscured automatically, and you can check that. So once you upload that observation, you can make sure it was obscured, or you could obscure it on your own, just in case, because it might not do it automatically. So you could choose to do it, but I think it's better to obscure other than keep the coordinates private or change them to something else or to something more general. There are different options how to do it, because I think it's good to maintain the original coordinates somewhere to save those, because an expert might contact you and ask where you found that thing because they need it for a specific study, and then hopefully you'd want to share that data. And that happens from time to time.
All right, if we don't have any more questions, I want to thank you for joining us for the natural training, where you've learned a bit about serpentine grasslands and what makes them so special. We also learned about iNaturalist projects, including the one that Merav just made. And I want to make sure that we all let's thank both Paul and Merav for this wonderful presentation that they've given. And we are developing more topics to present. An example that Merav is keenly interested in doing, because she's an entomologist, is insects and arthropods. So stay tuned. And if you have any suggestions for topics, please send me a message. I would really like to see what we can do about creating one. Maybe you can be a presenter. Note that our recordings are all available on YouTube, our YouTube channel, KCCB's YouTube channel, as well as bioblitz.club. And this one will become available within a couple of days. You'll also receive a link to the video in email, follow-up email. And in the meantime, you can find our additional videos, as I mentioned, for virtual bioblitzes and trainings on our YouTube channel. So thank you for attending this webinar. And we could stay on a little bit longer if you still have questions. And I noticed that some people did put some things in the chat. So at this time we can, if anybody needs to go, you can, but we can stay on and answer some more questions. Thanks so much.
Deb, this is Charmin. Can I just ask if you put in an observation, like I went to Lake Cunningham yesterday and I added an observation, and I looked on to see if there was any project with Lake Cunningham, and there was my picture of what I posted. So when you take a picture someplace and post it on iNaturalist, does it automatically go to an area where you took that picture?
Yes, it has to have the exact coordinates, or I mean, if it doesn't, you could choose something a bit more general, but it has to have coordinates and time and date. Otherwise, it's not
So
useful.
when I posted it, it did have the date and the location of where I took it.
Yeah.
So then I just was curious if there was a project at.
There could be, but even if there's no project, it will still be in that location. And one day, if someone does create a project for that area, it will include everything that was ever found there. I mean, depending on what they want, but you could now create a project and it will include everything, or it will include, future observations or whatever you specify.
Okay, so if I was wondering about Henry Coe, then I could go to Henry Coe and find all the observations that have been made there, and that could be create a project just to protect the park or whatever.
Let me quickly share my screen, since I think people might be interested in this. So again, this is a random observation. This is our project that now should have 2 observations, I think. 5, look at that. People have been adding. Anyway, sorry, this is exciting. But let's say I'm going to explore, which is everyone's observations, 175 million observations. Now, I want to look at just stuff from Henry Coe, right?
Yeah.
So not a project, but a place. Okay, so this is searching for a polygon that probably already exists for Henry Coe. Okay, so these are all of, so it's not a project. I'm still on just, iNaturalist general website, but I filtered the observations. Okay, I used this thing to just narrow down what it shows me. Instead of 175 million, I want to just see the stuff in Henry Coe, which is 18,000, which is not that bad. 1,600 species is quite impressive. I could check the map, by the way, to look at the polygon. It's pretty awesome. Another important point, by the way, is that if there are any rare species, and there are rare species there, they probably won't be included because they have been obscured automatically, which means that instead of showing up right here, they will show as something very, very general, like, around here, which would probably not show up in the project. Okay, so you are losing probably most of the rare species, or the things that are assigned as rare or endangered. But you see all the rest. So if I would like to create a project about roads in Henrico, I could create a project with just this, right? Everything ever found in Henrico. But I could also, which would be a collection project. So it would be using the polygon for Henrico and any observation ever made there. But I could also use a traditional project, okay, the one that you add stuff to manually, and I can say, use this polygon because I still don't want anything that is outside the area, but I won't have any data on it because it's from whenever. And then I will ask people to add observations to that project if it's something sensitive. You had a question about the effect of roads, right? So it could be anything that shows the impact of roads on the preserve. Okay, it could be roadkill, it could be damage to plants. I don't know what else you had in mind, but you could list that. So projects usually will have, you know, a little description. Mine was very short. Please add observations with blah, blah, blah. So it could be very long. You could have links, you could have information if you want people to do specific stuff. And this is where you could have your journal posts, where you could tag specific people. So there are different things you could do with that. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I would probably, if I was going to do this, I would contact Audubon because they're the one, I think they're the ones that sent out the message of, you know, that they're worried about this.
Okay. And they'll probably ask me because that will be Shanique Kleinhaus, my friend, who is the environmental advocate for Audubon, Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. And we work a lot together. So yeah, and then I'll create a project for her. And then she could, you know, send it out to this big community of people interested in protecting Henrico. And that would be a good way for us to collect data. So as a volunteer, if you're interested, you could go over old observations from the park and maybe try and see which ones you could add to that project, okay? Like look for roadkills. Look, you could narrow it down to dead things in Henrico and see if they're on roads. Maybe you could add them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just I love that park. And when I found that message, I just thought, oh, maybe this is a way to contribute.
Yeah, and you know, another thing we do, so we have many projects about roadkills and stuff like that, but there are projects about birds being, you know, electrified by power lines. And that would be another good way to get all these observations together, because otherwise, you know, you have millions of observations of birds worldwide. But if you're interested in something so specific, it would be really good to group them together in a way that policymakers and environmental advocates can find these observations and use them. And let me know if you need help with that. I'm happy to help you with that project.
And then for the City Nature Challenge, regionally in the Bay Area, Cal Academy organizes that. But you want to talk a little bit about the City Nature Challenge? We're also at 8:01.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe let's do it very briefly. So the City Nature Challenge started as a competition between the San Francisco, the Bay Area, and LA. And now it's many cities worldwide. So if you live in a big city that is participating, you could participate through that city. Basically, they're competing with who has the most observations, species, and observers during the last weekend of April. So it's just a way to get people out and, you know, organize many bioblitzes and go out and document stuff and enjoy being a community scientist. But if you don't live in one of these cities, I think it was last year that they started creating another project just for people who are not in one of these big cities. And you could document stuff and add them to that project, which is really nice.
And not to steal your thunder, but the next one in April is going to be about City Nature Challenge, how to get involved, why it would be important for you to learn about it and participate. So, all right, I think we'll call it a night. And thank you everyone for your participation and for being eager to learn. Good night.
Thank you.
Hey.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Merav. Thanks, Paul. Rowan, did you want to ask a little bit more about getting people involved? Because Merav basically started the BioBlitz Club in the South Bay, and together we were able to get more people involved.
I was just really curious where to start. I think the idea of going to the Native Plant Society and the Audubon Club is a really good idea, because that's people who are already interested and maybe already have some organization.
Yeah, and if they're interested, you know, maybe you could collaborate with them, at least to begin with. That's how I started. I collaborated with Audubon because I was volunteering with the advocacy group. But then I met Deb, and we organized most of our events together. And then I still organize some with Audubon and with other organizations. But it's a good way to get started. And at least in this area, all these organizations are connected. So once you get into one community, you could get to know other communities and make more connections and get to know more people. They're all connected. They're all, you know, they're all friends. They're all, like, many people volunteer in more than one organization. So this, you know, it's a really amazing network. And I would guess it would be somewhat similar there. So start with any organization you can find, and as many as you can, I think would be good.
Yeah,
I definitely
thanks for.
see with, oh, sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I definitely see with both groups that the areas that they tend to meet tend to be like further away from the city center. They're areas that are harder to get to, especially for people who don't drive. So I guess that's a lot of why I don't tend to be involved, because I don't drive in a lot of these groups. And I'm really hoping to maybe get some more interest in like the parks that are like here in town. And I think that'd get a lot more public interest.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I love it. This is exactly what we do. Deb and I, we organize BioBlitzes intentionally in the middle of the city where it's easy to get to. And you don't need to drive far away. You might bike there, walk there, take public transportation. We probably get people that will never drive to the mountains near us, but might come to a city park, and you'd be amazed at what you could find in just a very random city park. There's always something cool because, you know, on a BioBlitz, you're interested in everything, you know, the insects, the mushrooms, the plants, anything you can find. So you'll always find something. Even the invasive species are interesting, like a fungus we just discovered on an invasive tree 2 days ago on a BioBlitz in a very highly disturbed place. So, you know, it's always exciting.
Yeah, I always notice, like, I'm super interested in bugs and snails and stuff. So I
Good.
always tend to notice these things. And then I'm like showing my friends, like, look at this cool bug I found, and look at this cool snail I found, and look at this snail I found today. It's the second native snail I found in Fresno. And they're like, that's so cool. But how do you find all these things?
So this
I'm
is
like,
exactly what you need to
"That's-
do. You need to organize some BioBlitzes and teach people how to do that, because most people will never notice those snails and insects and anything else. But once you show them all that stuff, they're like, you open their eyes, and it's such a wonderful experience.
getting my foot in the door to
Yeah.
this kinds of things. Like I just went to an event for the Native Plant Society here, but most of their events are actually in a park that's in a neighboring city, and it's not even really in that city either. It's kind of on the outskirts, so it's pretty far. So I'm hoping to get more stuff that's actually here, and at least like somewhere along the bus routes where people can get to.
Yeah, so you could try and, you know, find the right people in the Native Plant Society there, and in Audubon and Sierra Club and whatever organization you have there, the ones that would be interested in a city park, because I mean, you have all that stuff. You might not have a super rare plant, but you might have a rare, like we found a very rare spider in a very ugly park here. So, you know, you really never know what you'll find. So it's just about finding the right people, and you know, it might take time until you make all these connections, but you could start small and organize an event for your friends. So you learn how to do it and how to create the projects, how to get started, and make it bigger with time. And if you need any help with, you know, getting started with iNaturalist, or I don't know, any of these things, just reach out. I'm happy to help.
Okay, thank you.